ambition. This new edition, filling positions, looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. You stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings, and I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains, haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. I'm never gonna give up, fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my road.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHH LP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Harry, to you. That melodious voice is Harry, our station manager, WNHH 103.5 FM, and I have no hesitancy at all to kind of shout him out every time we do the show, because we need teamwork and we need people to kind of get up, rise up early in the morning and help us kind of launch the ship of state. Today's show really is really a blessing and an opportunity to talk with Keith Churchwell. He's MD and president of Yale New Haven Hospital. Let me read that again. Keith Churchwell, MD, president of Yale New Haven Hospital. Good morning, Dr. Churchwell. How are you doing?
Good morning. How are you doing, Tom?
Good. I know you and I have laid eyes on one another from time to time, and I got to say that I did put on a sport jacket, knowing that I would not be able to compete with you today, but still, I didn't want to just leave, make it be too obvious. So good to see you.
Just what's in the closet, Tom. Just what's in the closet.
And your wife probably helped you select some things, I would say. So
now you hurt me. Now you hurt me.
Again, this is really an important kind of opportunity for us. So we have about 55 minutes or so. And again, really appreciate your taking the time to be with us. Again, let's start off with kind of the general question of, as president of Yale New Haven Hospital, that's a multi-layered, multifarious, hopefully sometime joyful experience. But tell us about your role as president of Yale New Haven Hospital.
Tom, I don't think anyone's ever actually asked me that question in that particular way. It's a good question. We have over 17,000 employees actually who work every single day in some aspect of the hospital, whether it be in the inpatient or the ambulatory side, or actually in all of our clinics. Within that's truly almost a little small city, right? In regards to the day-to-day operations that actually work to benefit the greater community of New Haven from a medical standpoint. How we continue to evolve that in a way that actually gives us the opportunity for the highest quality of care, that has the right degree of investment from a medical standpoint, that I think is at this point multi-layered. And within the setting of actually a pandemic, is work that we think about and work towards every single day. So a lot going on. There's the financial aspects, there's the administrative aspects, the clinical aspects, there's the operational aspects day to day that work towards making sure that we're able to not only fund our mission, but actually support our mission in regards to all the patients that we take care of. We have in our triangle that actually talks about our missions and values. It really speaks to actually be able to take care of patients where they are, to understand what their needs are continually, and then work towards priorities and initiations with all of our partners, Yale Medicine, and all of our affiliates to work towards those particular goals.
Excellent. I was thinking, Dr. Churchwell, actually about this month being Heart Health Month, and also Black History Month. Some would say Afrogenesis Month, or Black to the Future Month, but certainly this is a month of celebration. And I was just looking in terms of heart health, that something in the Journal of Clinical Hypertension that some of our listeners and viewers might be interested in knowing, that it stated that African Americans are 2 to 3 times as likely as whites to die of preventable heart disease and stroke. And then I was referencing something that happened and was documented in 2018, that African Americans were 30% more likely to die from heart disease than non-Hispanic whites. And
44% more likely to die from cerebrovascular disease. It's a great point. In preparation for a paper that I was actually had the opportunity and the honor to chair as a presidential advisory on structural racism for the American Heart Association recently, we were able to look at that data and look at it very closely. And it's a lot of, there's some good news, but there's also bad news, and that points towards a need for us to actually even to our efforts. If you look at the data from 2010 to 2017, you do see not a significant decline in cardiovascular mortality and cerebrovascular mortality across all populations, and in particular around our African Americans. But what that data also shows us is that decline by 2017 was still less in terms of the overall rate of death than actually for white Americans. So although there has been a significant improvement, it's still at such a level that actually is greater than actually all the other populations combined from an ethnic and a race perspective in our country. So that tells us there's a tremendous amount of work to do. Hypertension being a significant issue. It is the bellwether in regards to the complications that occur from uncontrolled hypertension or poorly controlled hypertension from a heart perspective and from a cerebral vascular from a brain perspective. What we can do better, we have to do better in regards to thinking about in more innovative ways out to the community for an understanding about the need for blood pressure control, thinking about the right combination of therapies, both actually from a medical standpoint and lifestyle changes that will lead to a greater degree of effectual control of blood pressure, and then seeing the opportunity that presents itself in terms of improving the overall cardiovascular health for our community. You know, we're talking about not huge changes in blood pressure can have a huge impact in terms of the decrease in overall morbidity and mortality from hypertension in our African American community. So working with our community groups, working with a degree of innovation with our physicians and clinic and nursing staff here on campus in our ambulatory settings, that's a unique opportunity for us every single day to actually make an impact.
And someone brought to my attention that, is it true that African American women are 60% more likely to have high blood pressure? I would have thought 30%, 40%, but 60% more likely.
That number is not familiar to me. There is a higher degree of incidence of complications in African American women versus men. Interesting. And the why behind that is still for us to actually try to figure out. Probably one of the reasons that African American women are the centers of many of our homes. They take care of everybody, both husbands and daughters and grandmothers and grandfathers, along with children. So at times their health actually slides a bit as opposed to them working on everyone's else.
Good point.
So we have to take that into consideration in regards to focusing greater efforts in terms of information, but also making sure that our African American women are seeking advice, seeking counsel in terms of their health, and that we are ensuring that they have the right follow-up, and we're actually working towards the right combination of therapies, both medical and lifestyle, that should make an impact.
And folks should know, by the way, that when you speak about this issue, it's not just something that you've read or that you've been told, but you are a accomplished cardiologist, and that's also very key for people to know that you're not only head of the president of the New Haven Hospital, but a practicing cardiologist. I mean, that's. Well,
Tom, I want to be truthful. I'm sort of a lapsed cardiologist these days.
Right.
I don't get a chance to see patients anymore, although I had very active practices in the past. I still work on these particular issues on a number of different levels here locally, obviously with programs like this, but also with working with Tisha and with others across the spectrum of what Yale New Haven Hospital touches to improve overall health. And then at the national level with the American Heart Association as a volunteer, as the chair of their National Advocacy Committee, and also on the executive board and a number of other opportunities to help affect change, to think about what are the innovations and opportunities for us to improve the overall life and health of those that we touch. Yes.
Just thanks for the clarification. Just before we move on, and you've kind of alluded to this, and not that I want to give you the chance to repeat exactly what you said, but it seems to me that the state of minority health is something that's top of our mind, and not top of your mind. So, any thoughts as we think of on February 15th, 2021, about the general statement of the state of minority health right now? How would you characterize that?
So that's a great question, Tom. And one of the things that's been striking over the past 12 months and what has been laid bare is the degree of disparity in terms of the delivery of health and its impact on the African-American communities on a day-by-day basis. What we see, for example, what we have seen with the COVID pandemic is that has been very illustrative of these particular issues is the fact that African-American, brown and black and brown communities have been impacted to a greater degree than other communities across, not only within the New Haven area, but really across the country. Greater degree of hospitalization and a greater degree of mortality if you look across the country. Thankfully not shown here in New Haven because I think a number of innovations we've actually worked towards. But that has shown us that actually the issues of comorbidities like hypertension, diabetes, obesity continue to play a significant role in our communities, and that those impacts have actually laid bare the fact that with COVID that has potentiated the issues of mortality and morbidity with this particular pandemic, this particular disease. So it has told us there was a lot of work to do. Yeah. Not only just from the medical standpoint, from a society standpoint, if we're going to make a real impact ultimately in closing this gap and actually improving the overall health journey for those that we serve.
You know, when you mentioned making an impact and being collectively whole, particularly given the context of COVID, let's move to COVID for a few minutes if that's okay with you.
That's fine.
Some people may not know, some may know that you did I believe one or two wonderful town halls on COVID and hosted them as a moderator. And I enjoyed watching your style. By the way, I picked up a few tips on how to follow up questions with people. But New Haven Hospital System, you've done a few wonderful, really informative town halls on testing and treatment and vaccination. Can you share a little bit about that?
Well, we've taken the opportunity to try to get out to the public and the community as much as we can. The idea is that more information, the better. The more transparent we can be in regards to the process of vaccination, its impact on our communities, why people should be vaccinated, what the side effects are that we know, the overall opportunity that vaccination presents itself to try to allay fears, to try to allay concerns, to get more people vaccinated, because we know it is very evident, and there's data coming out just today, that the more vaccinated, the greater impact that we're going to have, the quicker impact we're going to have in terms of ameliorating this disease. It is a safe vaccine. It has a high degree of efficacy, greater than 95% in the vaccines that we're using at this time with Moderna and Pfizer. The side effect profile is minimal. It is not long-standing. We have not been able to show, and we're not going to show significant complications or long-term effects from the vaccine that is actually worse than getting COVID. We always say that. What's worse, getting COVID or getting vaccinated? That's an easy question for us to actually answer. It's getting COVID. So it has been actually a pleasure to get out and to talk to as many people as possible, because people have good questions.
Yes.
There are no dumb questions in regards to this. There are always good questions. There are things that have been told and have been detailed in social media that we need to allay people's fears. And then people just actually, because of the rapidity in terms of its evaluation, which has actually been international, people have concerns about that. We actually have to work towards allaying those particular fears. People are understanding that from a scientific standpoint, the pathway has been remarkably vigorous in its evaluation and has been shown to be incredibly efficacious.
Excellent.
Yep.
We're joined, Dr. Churchwell, by Reverend Clayton and Reverend Perry, who are the YCCI, Yale Center for Clinical Investigation, Cultural Ambassadors. I just wondered they might want to comment on that topic, because they've been in the trenches, as you know, on this topic, even before COVID for a number of years. Reverend Clayton, perhaps if I could just go to you if you have any comments to share about the work that you might be doing in this regard. Reverend Clayton, if you could just unmute yourself, that would be fine.
Thank you, Tom. And Dr. Churchwell, it's just so wonderful to hear you again. Thank you for your willingness to share this information that is so needed today. And of course, I see my colleague, Dr. Perry, and Tisha, the wonderful person who put this thing together for
That's
us.
right. That's right.
So happy to see y'all this morning. The ambassadors have been meeting weekly to try to, or to get out the information, accurate information based upon what the Yale School of Medicine has with our weekly meetings, to dispel some of the myths and some of the questions, to help some of the questions that the people are having. As Dr. said, there are no dumb questions. And people have so many questions because they have been misinformed. But thanks be to God and to the great work of Yale Medical School, we as ambassadors have been able to help some of the people in our neighborhoods to understand the importance of getting vaccinated, help them to better understand the importance of social distancing and so on and so forth. And as Dr. Churchwell just said, the vaccination is very important. It's better to have the vaccination versus getting COVID. It's either the vaccination or sickness in most cases. So,
and I believe, Reverend Clayton, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've participated in one of the trials. Is that correct?
I was part of the Pfizer trial at YCCI. Received my first shot August 31st and the second shot on September the 14th. And there were no issues. I mean, some people have a sore arm, maybe experience a fever. I had zero.
Excellent.
Side effects from the vaccine. And just to share with you, I had a meeting with another pastor who, while we're having our meeting, we have social distancing and had our mask on, and then we decided to have a snack. And he received a phone call that he and his wife were with another person who had tested positive, and they were there about an hour. Now, I could have been the person who have suffered from COVID if I had not received that vaccination, because both of them got quite sick. So that vaccine is a blessing.
Excellent, excellent. Reverend Perry, please share, if you would, again, as your involvement with the Yale Center for Clinical Investigation and the Cultural Ambassadors, and anything you've heard so far in terms of how you guys have been really laboring in the vineyard in a really, if I might say, stellar way.
I don't think you have enough time, but I'm going to try.
Give us the synoptic version. Give us the Reader's Digest version.
You asked me to give you a version, so don't limit me now to what you ask.
The Lord is eternal.
What I have to say.
All right.
First of all, I thank you, Dr. Churchwell, and to my colleagues, Clayton, and to our wonderful teacher, who is our coach.
It's a good one at that.
The importance of this program and the importance of what we do at Yale is tantamount to where health and health outcomes are going to be in the future. I mean, by having qualified people on this program like Dr. Churchill, and to be able to look at some of the issues, that's so important. I was in a study once, and they brought up this fact that there were some children who were in the water and they were drowning. People got out the boat to save the children. And there were 3 of them. And so they were saving the children. And one of the guys says, I'm going to go upstream. And the other 2 said, no, we need you here to take these children out to the water to save them. He said, but if I go upstream, I can find out where these children are coming from. So in terms of the issue of outcomes, like the outcome for the number of people African Americans who may die during COVID or during heart disease, it is important that we look at the social determinants of what brings us to this position. And we can't leave the show without talking about zip codes and stress and trauma and the American approach toward medicine with regards to African Americans. And so, you know, Dr. Churchwell, one of the things that I'm interested in also is diversity in your hospital and how that reaches out to this community. Because if we're afraid of the doctors and we don't trust the doctors, we trust the ministers. How do we get beyond that level to the level of where you are? And I think that's what we have. That's the kind of education and the message we've also got to share with our community if we're going to bridge this gap of distrust.
Dr. Churchwell, I do have kind of a personal question, but I wondered if you might be willing to respond to Reverend Perry's comment at this time. You're on mute, Dr. Churchwell.
And Tom, I knew better. One of the things that we've been working on in my time here in New Haven is thinking through and seeing how we can actually improve the overall diversity, not only in terms of the number of individuals in the clinical profession who would be recognized by our community as those that they would have a natural and actually positive response to, the Black and brown physicians actually here at New Haven, but also a greater diversity of thought, the opportunity of actually understanding. You know, the issue is really, I've got to be able to actually come to you, to actually sit with you and understand where you're coming from, right? To understand what your history is and how your belief system has evolved and how we can actually work together to improve your overall health. I actually was asked to moderate a meeting, what's called a second look meeting, which we started here a number of years ago for African-American and Latino medical students looking to come here to Yale New Haven and to Yale to begin their careers and also foster their careers. That meeting was 2 weeks ago. We had 346 participants actually on that Zoom call. So, and that is up from quite a few over the past few years. So I think we're moving in the right direction in terms of being able to find, to be able to recruit, for people to understand African Americans, in particular Latino residents, interns, and attendings who see this as a pathway for professional development and opportunity to actually work within our environment. So it will continue to look differently and look differently from a positive standpoint. But even more importantly, is actually continuing the process of understanding the needs of our community, understanding the needs of each at the individual level, at the population level, so that we as clinicians, I say that's the royal we, because you know I don't practice as much as I can't practice these days, but that's so that we are asking the right questions, we are searching for the right answers, and that we are communicating in a way that our patients understand that we are here to benefit, not to cause harm, not to understand, not to listen, but actually the opposite as we go forward. We are a scientific, academically health clinical system, one of the largest in the country, second largest in terms of bed population in the whole country, 1,541 beds, just this hospital. So that in itself is a huge opportunity.
Yes.
We have to be engaged with all the community so that we can answer the right questions just from a scientific standpoint. So if we're bringing out additional therapy, additional opportunities to think about therapy, it has to have its impact not only in one community, but actually over much more of a broader sense. So we have to engage in the right way. We have to understand what the needs are, understand what the questions are and the concerns, but also ensure that we're actually getting the right feedback for those who are actually going to work with us, so that we do answer the right questions for our Black and brown patients.
Dr. Churchwell, I'm somewhat uncomfortable in asking this next question, but people need to know who you are, and quite frankly, you're a modest person on one hand, but you're super accomplished in your family on the other. I mean, that's just a fact. You can't deny it. I mean, you can run, you can hide, but the documents are there. So, you received your bachelor's degree from Harvard. I won't hold that against you. You had to do something. You couldn't go to New Haven, perhaps, but you received your bachelor's degree from Harvard, and you're medical training from Washington University in St. Louis. And then you completed your postgraduate training in cardiovascular disease and nuclear cardiology at Emory School of Medicine. And then at Vanderbilt in Tennessee, you led the cardiology, cardiac surgery, and vascular surgery services, and truly to become one of the nation's leading programs in terms of depth and breadth of its comprehensive approach to patient care, research, and training. So, and even before becoming president, you were chief operating officer and executive vice president here at Yale New Haven Hospital. So the question kind of is, it's really a subjective and psychological one, but I appreciate your being willing to answer it. Tell us what drives you.
Oh gosh. So I had great parents, Tom. My father was the first African-American reporter for a major metropolitan newspaper in the South, Nashville Banner, some now going on 70 years ago. My mother, who raised 5 kids. I was the youngest of the 5. I have an identical twin brother, so I was the youngest of the 5. Was a school teacher for 30 years after she had the last of the 5 kids. They instilled in us I think the drive, the need for to search for knowledge, the need to actually be out in the public, to think about what service meant, to engage and understand what your opportunity is, what you actually wanted to do in life, to encourage it. At one time, Tom, my parents on a newsman's salary and a first grade teacher salary had 5 kids in undergraduate and graduate school. I asked my mom one day how she did it. She said, "I'll never tell." At the end of the day, so they showed us that was the opportunity. They had been in the mix of the latter part of the 20th century, right in the maelstrom of the civil rights movement. Had seen the issues of segregation and integration and the difficulties within the South. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, East Nashville. But they, at each and every turn, they gave us the opportunity to excel, but they also had the expectation that we would actually excel. So I think that's part of the drive. What I'm doing, I find incredibly interesting. I tell people when they ask me that question, I get up in the morning ready to actually go to work. I love the work. I was able to fall into a line of work or line of a profession that I find intimately fascinating almost every single day. And the work that we do and the opportunity to actually improve the lives from a medical standpoint, from a social standpoint, of a large number of patients. You know, I don't practice anymore, but I tell everybody I have a constituency of hundreds of thousands of patients now, right? They're part of the responsibility. I am supercharged every single day to think through how do we actually solve these problems and continue to work towards a better end.
And keeping with Black History Month and just the mothers and fathers and grandparents and great-great-grandparents that didn't have these opportunities, but still allow us to, all of us on this call, to be on this call right now. I'm so glad you referenced that. I mean, the record needs to show that you have a twin brother, Kevin Churchwell, and he's the president of Boston Children's Hospital. I mean, that's, I don't think are there any other medical centers in the United States that have 2 brothers that are presidents that you know of? I
don't know.
It's rare.
It's a little unusual. You're right to point it out.
It's a little unusual. We need to just kind of digest that for a moment. And it's Andre. He's your older or your younger brother?
Oh, he's older, sure.
And he's at Vanderbilt and chief diversity officer there and senior associate dean for diversity affairs. So there's something kicking here. If I can just digress, what do you think caused you guys not to rebel? Often in a family you'll have children.
Tom, you didn't know my father, so obviously that's you'd have known him. That was not actually part and parcel of actually what we were asked to do. Tom, there was always an interesting question to try to answer. There was church, there was family, there was school, there were extracurricular activities. There was an opportunity to actually evolve and become a unique person. Actually, I think at the end of the day, there wasn't a great need for rebellion. And I say that because we were allowed to grow and to become our own individual person within that particular framework. And I think we were given the right tenets. We were, in regards to our day-to-day life, both work life and spiritual life and professional life. My parents, I think, on many of occasions, I think back through my life, made a point to actually give concrete examples of what service rally looked like, what one should actually think to gain from service, which is actually minimal for yourself, but also what it brings actually to the community. And these were examples, and these were conversations, and there was also a lot of fun in our household. There was always sports, there was always games, there was always great social interaction. It made it, from my perspective, the youngest of the 5 kids, and seeing the examples of the other three who were younger, an easy template to actually understand and to follow, and to find my own path.
That's so important. As you know, Dr. Churchwell, one of the areas of the ambassadors that have been focusing on is encouraging the next generation. And what you just said really kind of ties into that, because I think all of us have a concern about what the future, particularly in terms of our young people, might be. But what can we do together as a communities of color to support our young people who have an interest in healthcare or interest in medicine or an interest in research?
So, what I've done in my career is to mentor when asked, to also stay as an example for those who actually, for a path they would like to follow, to be available to answer any questions, and to also, if there are opportunities for those who are interested, to help to shepherd them through those particular pathways so that they can work towards developing and realizing their overall goals. We do this actually at the individual level all the time. We should. My door, my wife, it drives my wife a little crazy, but phone's always available, door's always open. And she sets the example also, and for that, as have my brothers, as my sisters. So, you can give back every single day in some form or fashion. This is one example of that. Happy to have the opportunity to speak with you and everyone else here on the show. But we should do that because incrementally we build upon those particular building blocks. Someone may hear us and actually be sparked to actually ask the right question, to think about what's the next step, to understand that there may be hurdles in front of you. We all have hurdles, but these are hurdles we can overcome. I'm a big believer that there's not so much failure, but there are lessons that we learn, that we from those particular goals and objectives that we may not reach the mountaintop to, that teaches us so much about ourselves and about the community that we live in and those around us. And so the next time that we're actually thinking about an opportunity, we actually are moving in the right and proper direction. I always think about it that way.
Excellent. Reverend Perry and Reverend Clayton, I mean, we've talked offline often about how to encourage the next generation. I guess wondered if, from the cultural ambassador standpoint, if you'd like to comment on that, about how do we encourage the next generation. And Reverend Clayton, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Tom. The next generation is very important for not only for our generation, but for the world. And in the church, we do several things to try to help the children, encourage them along in terms of their education, and try to keep them going in the direction that they should go. In terms of YCCI, we have the Young Ambassadors Program, which I will ask Dr. Perry to talk about that, because that's his baby, and I think he should rock it a little bit. But it's just giving people a chance, these young people a chance who have an interest in science and medicine. It exposed them to information that will make their brain want to go into a direction that will be helpful in the area of science and medicine. So I think I want Dr. Perry to talk about the young ambassadors a little bit, because like I said, that's his baby.
Reverend Perry, just before I have you rock the baby, I love that metaphor. I think Tisha has a comment also that she'd like to share.
I just wanted to point out, Tom, the hospital is a partner with us in so many initiatives focused on diversity. And also, I know Keith probably doesn't want to toot his own horn, but the hospital has had some amazing programs specifically focused on these pathways to employment. There's the partnership to help train the technicians and bring them on board and really have people of the community have employment opportunities in areas where the hospital is going to have vacancies. There's been an incredible effort with the residents program to really make sure that we have diversity among the residents. So to Reverend Perry's point, kind of getting downstream and making sure that we are focused on the next generation. And then the hospital itself, we have to look at this data as we prepare for our CTSA grants. And, we think about, kind of measuring the overall diversity across the institution. But over 36% of the health system's workforce is of diverse backgrounds, and about 20% of the employees are African American. So, while we all want those numbers to continue to grow and we want to encourage, I think, also just giving, credit that the hospital and I know the med school and broadly, we've been partnered with these efforts specifically around diversity. And then the hospital's been a great partner, and Keith himself is one of the images you might see on our buses, focused on helping us make sure our clinical trials are diverse. And so he has one of those wonderful suits on and donning it for us for a good cause, trying to make sure our trials are very diverse. So it is something that obviously we all have a lot of work to do. But I think also I just wanted to make sure we didn't let the moment go by without thanking Keith for all he is doing already to help us in this effort. And even though I know Reverend Perry and Reverend Clayton will always be asking him, as they do for all of us, we need to do more and work together. There's a lot going on now that I think we can, just be happy and thankful that it's already happening while we work towards this broader vision with the young ambassadors and some of the pipeline programs and stretching the research and diversity efforts across the health system. Keith has just been an incredible partner for us, thinking about how we're going to focus on those specific initiatives, which are related to both the pipeline programs and diversity, but also this, making sure that we have an opportunity for diverse participation for our trials across the health system. So that was the comment I wanted to make, but I'll turn it over to Reverend Perry and let him rock that baby, because we're very proud of the young ambassadors.
Reverend Perry.
I'm a son of the South, and the culture in the South is really different. I mean, even in terms of Black owning homes coming up, and I started out in a segregated school. I ended up going to Livingstone College, which is a Black, and then Atlanta University. So I have this kind of cultural thing that has followed me. When I went to New York, my doctor was a doctor from Howard University. His name was Benjamin Diet. His daughter now is a doctor at Yale who's married another doctor, Dr. Desir. So, it's like I'm caught up in this. And so when we looked at our ambassadors and we looked at our age and we looked at the messaging, and we found that we were effective in our messaging, but we could be more effective if we could include young people. So we got college graduated African Americans from our churches. We put them in the program so that they could be trained, so that they could help us recruit, inform, empower, and educate our community. And I think that's where we need to be. Now, here's the thing that I'm trying to ask Tisha and Yale to do, which is, I know folk don't believe in reparations, but I do. And I'm thinking that if we can get a platform for young people in high school, junior high school, like something like what they're doing down at Spelman College with their students to see whether or not they would be interested in the fields of medicine, whether it's dentistry, whether it's just healthcare, whatever. If we can start that now, we can really change medicine in America and the world. And I'm hoping that some donors listening today to what we're trying to propose. I already got Granville Academy. Our churches are going through our list of students to see those who may have an interest or an aptitude. And then we can start a program now. And I'm gonna tell you something. In Waterbury, when I went to Waterbury, when we moved from Roanoke, Virginia to Waterbury, I had to go to a dentist. My mother would not let me go to a white dentist. She sent me to the only Black dentist in town. And every single Black person in Waterbury went to that dentist. And for a reason, she trusted him. Mm. So I'm thinking we need to get more people that looks like us, and not just look like us, but I mean, train for this profession and for this work. And I think we can do it, but we've got to reach out, and we've got to not wait for, someone to say, oh, well, now is your time. Is coming. Let's get into some good trouble. Let's see if we can't start now. Change this. That's all I'm saying.
Excellent. We have about 12 minutes or so. And Dr. Churchwell, I want to go to clinical trial for a second. And Tisha's mentioned the word and also had the ambassador share. We hear this term clinical trial, but I think in spite of Moderna and Pfizer and knowing that now we have vaccines and polio and TB and things and even the invention it was created at the med school. We had what was it, Tisha? We had in the 1940s we had because of the scientific discovery at the med school, penicillin. So
I was going to say, Tom, how old do you think I am? You're an eternal spirit, and every day is present. But I didn't mean to infer that you were actually there, but that I'm trying to indicate that clinical trials is ongoing and will be ongoing, and is even going to be more, in my mind, more important as we see these mutations, et cetera, and people's education about medical discoveries. So Dr. Churchwell, I just wondered whether you wanted to kind of comment on the importance of diverse participation in clinical trials, and why is it important for us to participate in them?
What history tells us is that in the past, the degree of diverse participation in clinical trials was very limited. A generation ago, the great majority of clinical trials were done in white males. So data from those trials was actually detailed and then assessed to say that the results would be the same for white females, for African-American males, for African-American females. And it turns out that there is variation in terms of what the data truly tells us. Where really opportunity is. Assumptions in regards to the clinical processes and the overall risk factors and how they present themselves were incorrect. So just from a scientific standpoint, the broadening nature and the broadness and the need for a much more inclusive population to understand exactly the effect of a medication or the effect of a particular pathway of care, to really understand what the true risk factors are, who is at truly risk, at risk for a particular disease process, both in the short term and long term. It necessitates having a much broader scope, a much broader plane of individuals who are participating, so that we truly can understand not only the total population, but those populations within the population, so that we are targeting therapy, targeting opportunity, that we truly are moving towards and evolving a true personalized pathway for medical care that is going to be beneficial to the individual and to populations as a whole. So that's really the enthusiasm of the basic understanding that we need to have a large swath, a broad population who are participating in and helping us understand the impacts of therapy and pathways of care, so that we are making the right decisions in regards to what we're trying to accomplish, what the needs are for our patients as we go forward.
If you guys, I think you're smiling because you might have seen my production assistant sneak into the screen. So that's what happens when you go live.
What Zoom's all about.
That's what Zoom's all about. Real time, real life.
That's right.
Reverend Clayton and Reverend Perry would like to comment on that in terms of clinical trials and the importance of it.
Again, it's very important, and the reason why I took part in the Pfizer Corona 19 study is because the participants of the African community at that time was very low. And I wanted to be a part of that to make sure, and also encourage others to take part. I even asked my wife to be a part of that study as well, and she came on board. But when you have a diverse community in the clinical trials, the medications are effective and safe. And otherwise, as Dr. Churchwell had said, with just all white males, you just get the data for that. But now we have the data across the board for all people. And at Yale, it was 41% participation of minorities for COVID. And that's a great thing. I'm excited about that. So that's just a great thing for us.
Reverend Perry?
Yeah, I think that, I think there are a number of things that we need to look at. One is as I said earlier, the whole healthcare industry, and just the whole thing. We need to look at that and be honest about it. And at the same time, I think we need to accentuate the positive, because that's important. If people only hear the negative, then the mere fact that you may have had chickenpox or a polio shot. I mean, we've had these vaccines. And the other thing I try to tell people, when I go to the doctor and my doctor gives me a prescription, I don't sit down and say, well, how many people studied in the trial for this, and does it really work? What are the ingredients? I take it right to the pharmacy and I get it filled. This is medicine. We're not scientists. And so we have to try to reach out to our constituents and to our community people and make the message very clear. Medicine is really about saving lives. It's really about helping people. And it is not targeting us as one population within and saying the COVID vaccine is going to put some DNA, change the DNA of Black people, and all the rest of the people are going to go free. That's just ridiculous. So we've really got to help with the messaging and lead some credibility to the science, because the science, even today, if you look at the news, the science is working.
Yes.
And that's the message.
We have about 3 or 4 more minutes, Dr. Churchwell, and I want to know if I can embarrass you a little further. And what I mean by that is you're involved here in New Haven. You're not just president of the New Haven Hospital. You reference you serve on the national board directors of the American Heart Association. I urge people to Google the American Heart Association and reference the statement that you authored and coordinated with your fellows about racism as a public health crisis. People need to kind of just understand that this is not just a local or a state or a national, but this is an international movement about equity for all of us. But you're on the national board of the American Public Heart Association. You're president of the New Haven Symphony Orchestra here in New Haven. And you're known as the Walk with the Doc sessions on Saturday mornings in Dixwell, Dixwell and Newellville neighborhoods. I want you to kind of just share with folks, but we hear this term community as a cliche, but it seems to me that you kind of epitomize what does it mean to be community involved? So I'm curious, what does community means to you personally, and what does community mean from your standpoint, from a Yale New Haven Hospital perspective?
Well, Tom, it's when I was starting my career and sort of a midpoint, and probably would say I was gaining some success as a cardiologist, I came to realize that I had to do more than that to be a part of the overall movement. I think in a way that was more fulfilling than just being a cardiologist, I guess, at the end of the day. The opportunities here in New Haven with the Symphony and also with Columbus House and what we're actually doing with the hospital, I find that as in a way to fulfill what my parents had taught me, an opportunity to really fulfill myself personally. There's some degree of selfishness in actually in all this, but also if we're going to actually truly make an impact on the communities that we serve, it is more than just at the end of the day probably handing out medications. Actually understanding, being really part of the fabric, I think is actually really important and really key. So to me, it has been both when I was in Nashville and also in New Haven, probably a natural extension of the work that I do, but also of the fulfilling my overall internal commitment of the type of person I'm trying to evolve and to be, I guess, at the end of the day. I find enjoyment in these activities. I find fulfillment in them. I think other people also do. That's why they do them. I encourage others to actually take on those roles and take on these opportunities to think through that, because in that way you're imparting your own personal knowledge, personal capability, opportunity to actually leave a bit of an impact on others in a way that we hope is positive. I think is positive. And in that, actually, that is the investment that actually fulfills me as an individual.
Excellent. Harry's going to play the music, so that'll be kicking us off. So I'm going to push it right to the end. And given his watch and my watch, we might only have 2 or 3 minutes left. I want to kind of at least get this question into the cyber sphere and the social media sphere about 10 years from now. I mean, how do the ambassadors see the next 10 years in terms of their impact and the impact in New Haven? And Keith, also for you, your vision for you and New Haven Hospital 10 years from now. I just love these perspective questions now for us to really vision and reimagine a better future than what we've had thus far. So Dr. Churchwell, I'd like to kind of give you the last word, and then if we have time for everyone else to share.
I'll try to be brief to give Reverend Perry, Reverend Clayton some time here, but as I look upon my role here over the next few years, I see an opportunity to actually join our patients in their journey for better health. And that's truly a journey. And to think through what's happening before they come to the hospital, while they're in the hospital, and after the hospital. Because in that, if we join them in that to a greater degree, then we will improve their overall health. And in that, we'll improve their quality of life, their quantity of life, and also will have a positive impact on the community that we serve. Indeed.
Reverend Perry, and again, Harry will play the music, so we'll know that that's our goodbye.
Dr. Churchwell, did you know Dr. Dees in New York? The doctor used to make house calls.
No.
Oh, okay. Just wondered. No, I think I think that our work in New Haven is gonna develop a template for the rest of the country. I think our numbers are gonna increase. I think healthcare is going to be taken to a higher platform, and I think that we're going to have a renaissance in research and recruitment here in New Haven.
Reverend Clayton, we have about 20 seconds.
You're muted.
Reverend Clayton, we'll pick up with you on the next show. It's likely that we'll have a more show. I'll be sure to call on you at the beginning. I'll call on you at the beginning next month, next week, whenever it might be. Dr. Churchwell, thank you so much. Tisha, thank you so much. Reverend Clayton, Reverend Perry, I really appreciate it. And again, this is the Tom Ficklin Show, and shout out to WNHA. Reverend Clayton, I won't forget about you, man. I promise.
You got it, Tom.
Okay.
Take care, everybody.
Action, I'm ready to go. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, hey.